All right, everybody. So today on the podcast, we have Andrew Jones. How we doing, Andrew?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you finally. I know we've had a little bit of a phone tag here and there, but I'm glad that we're able to sit down and get this done.
Absolutely, man. So yeah, I actually followed your page probably a couple of years ago. So for people who aren't aware of you, which for most of my listeners who might not be aware of you at this point, you have a page, Fitness with AJ, right, on Instagram, and
Yeah.
you kind of have a very interesting story that we're going to dive into. So, and just for people also listening, as far as the charity donation goes today, Andrew's going to get back to us because he's actually got his own charity he works with. But he's going to look into some others as well. Whatever we end up going with there, we'll end up posting down below. And of course, any links to Andrew's stuff there as well. So we'll get back on that. So Andrew, one of the thing I actually don't know how I came across your page because it was years ago, and then I might have even reached out before I had the podcast just because the story was super interesting to me. But why don't you tell people your story and like obviously you've got the fitness stuff, but like specifically to you, what's kind of your story there?
Sure. So it would probably be good if I gave a little bit of backstory. I am the youngest of three brothers. My family has moved us around quite a bit. I've lived in Florida twice. I've lived in Minnesota for about a year and a half, and we ended up here in Connecticut. And one of the things that really grew me as a person was learning how to relearning how to fit into different schools and different social climates. So that kind of built the foundation for my interest in studying communications when I finally got to college. Um, Making the transition from high school to college, I was leaving behind a lot of extracurricular activities. I was involved in student government. I was involved in music through our choir, our music honor society. I worked with students with special needs. I really loved being involved, something that my parents instilled into my brothers and I, always being involved with something constructive. And a big outlet of that was sports. So I was playing sports every season in my high school career. And when I made that transition to college, I decided to leave just about all of that behind. It wasn't long until I realized that from participating in sports, I just naturally had that urge to be doing something physical at some point in the day. So when I was a freshman in college, I just made my way to the weight room and I began training and falling in love with the idea of becoming stronger, becoming the best version of myself. I later learned about, I entered myself into physique contests and really disciplined myself to follow a rigorous training and diet routine. And of course, year after year, I would refine it and try to come back better. And so that kind of made a foundation for my health. So halfway through my college career is when things started to get a little hairy. I ended up actually being contract I ended up contracting strep throat and conjunctivitis or pink eye, whatever you want to call it. I ended up getting both of those twice in about a 3 to 4 month time frame. And that was just a lot on my immune system. I remember being thinking that I almost had to admit myself to the hospital because of how much this really knocked me off my feet. But what was happening was that my immune system was just so overworked that it essentially allowed for that bacteria that causes strep. It allowed for that bacteria to infiltrate my cardiac tissue, cause irreversible damage in the form of inflammation and then eventually scarring. And I was left with a viral myocarditis. So now my heart was actually working a little bit less efficient than what I was used to. Not so much though that it completely kept me out of doing anything physical, but the symptoms were there. At this point, I would experience shortness of breath when trying to go to sleep, um, a little bit of shortness of breath when exerting myself, and I was actually led to believe that that was acid reflux.
Hmm.
And I kind of am kicking myself every time I think about that. But I eventually learned that I was experiencing a viral myocarditis, and this was the first I ever was told that I had a heart issue. And This was the first I had ever been introduced to my cardiologist. And I will recall him saying, Andrew, this is something that many people live their lives with. It can go in different directions. Some people end up having this disease and it gets worse and they need a full heart transplant. And me, 22 years old at the time, I'm hearing those words and I'm just thinking that's just not me. I've played sports my entire life. I'm doing everything by the book, or at least to the best of my ability to stay healthy. So if I have to take a couple of pills, whatever it was, a beta blocker or ACE inhibitor, whatever they had me on, it was that's fine. I can just throw it in with my supplement stack, and that's the worst that things would get. And obviously, I was wrong. I might have jinxed myself, thinking that I was stronger than I was. And it turned out that this disease was not done with me. So after graduating from college, I began to succumb to that disease, and I entered end-stage heart failure. And at this point, I was always experiencing shortness of breath. I was always tired. I was living in my bedroom for weeks on end.
Wow.
And then I was in and out of doctor's offices for months. And now it's getting to the point where I'm becoming impatient. I'm looking for a solution. I want an answer as to what we're going to do about this because I want to get back to my life. I was watching my life kind of just fall apart around me. I wasn't the same person that I was. The relationship that I was in had suffered because of that, and I I was a completely different person. Not being able to have a physical outlet it was in a way damaging to my soul. So it was in and out of doctors' offices, being tested for all types of diseases and cancers, and the mental toll that it takes on you waiting to hear back to see if you have this disease or you don't have this disease. At the time I was just really just trying to get to, the end goal is just to be healthy again. But, going back, you think out how much stress and fear that instilled in you just waiting for these results. And thankfully, nothing really came back positive with any cancers or diseases, but we knew that my heart was failing and that something needed to be done. Um, I eventually went to see my cardiologist one day, and I was with my mother, and he told me that if there was any major changes to my weight or anything of that cause, to call him immediately. Maybe a day or two after that appointment, I just kind of woke up in my bed. It was almost noon at this time, and I was just so tired. My mom was just trying to get me out of my room, out of my bed, and just to just be active. She doesn't want to see her son in this state. She's used to me running around and always have something to do. And so she had me go on a walk with her and just down our street, and I couldn't even make it of a third of the way down. So now she's really concerned, and we did what my cardiologist had told me to do. And if it wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't have done nothing. Um, and so I stepped on the scale, and it turns out that I had gained about 7.5 pounds since last seeing my cardiologist, which was a day and a half prior.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so I'm sure you, as with your experience, you know exactly what that means. So my heart was at a point where it was in congestive heart failure, and all that fluid retention was the cause for the added weight. And that's a serious indicator of how badly my heart was functioning. My EF, my ejection fraction, which measures efficiency for my heart's output, was sub 10 at this point.
Wow.
So, yeah, you could definitely feel it. And that was technically an emergency. So I had to be admitted to the ER. And upon my admittance to the ER is when I was told that I needed a heart transplant. And it would be, if my life were a movie, this would be the moment where, we have that, oh my gosh, heart transplant, terrible news. But for me, it was finally an answer. Thank you, God. Like, all right, let's get this heart transplant done. And, it kind of speaks to why I'm so glad that I have the job I do now at New England Donor Services, because I am part of my job is getting people to understand the realities of organ and tissue transplant. And for me, getting the news that I need a heart transplant, I never had that conversation. I never learned about it the way that I've learned through experience and through the people that I work with. I turned to my cardiologist who was delivering me this news and said to him, "All right, well, go back into whatever meat locker you guys have, whatever freezer that you keep these organs on ice, wherever they are. Let's get this transplant done." And it's a little bit embarrassing, thinking that that's how it was done, but he
This would be
told.
the part in the movie where, somebody happened to have just gotten into an accident and they have a perfectly healthy heart for you and they happen to match your blood type perfectly, right? That's what the
Yeah,
movie involves.
exactly, right? That would have been great, no waiting time or anything. But the reality is that that's not how transplants work. That's not how organ donation works. And because of a lot of movies and television, people are led to believe that. We'll touch on that in a little bit, but I'm told that I would have to be added to a wait list. And before being added to the wait list, I would have to undergo a bunch of tests where they look at me from my head to my toes to get a better, a much clearer medical picture of how I would fare with the invasive surgery and the requirement for maintaining the transplant or the graft. With the exception of my heart, I was in good condition. I kind of passed those tests with flying colors. And I was finally admitted to the ICU on the 10th floor at Hartford Hospital, and I ended up staying there for the next 4 months. And me being I apologize to my dog in the background. Me being the social butterfly community person that I am, for me to feel comfortable in this space, I ended up befriending the nurses, the staff that worked there, growing a huge appreciation for the work that they do. Not having any fear of asking any questions, getting any bad news. And I also had friends and family that would come visit me, and I had a great support system in that. So I really do consider myself very lucky, despite the fact that I'm a patient in the ICU. If, being in the ICU, you see families that come and are mourning the loss of a loved one, um, patients who are not considered independent, which I was. I was able to get out of bed on my own. I was able to walk around on my own. Um, I required very little assistance, and I was grateful for that. So at the end of 4 months, I did not get my transplant. Rather, my condition deteriorated despite all the amazing care that I was being shown. My condition got worse, and I had to be implanted with an LVAD or left ventricular assist device. This was news that I was not prepared for. My goal was transplant and only transplant. I had to wrap my head around the idea of living by the grace of a machine in about a few hours. Um, because of my condition, it went from doing the surgery later that week to doing the surgery the next day, then doing the surgery within a few hours. So I kept having people come back and tell me that they're pushing the surgery up. And that scared me because it made me understand that this was becoming serious
Yeah.
and that something needed to be done. So it was very difficult to just say, okay, all right, put this robot inside my heart and I'll be fine. And it wasn't that easy. But again, I'm lucky that I was able to befriend my nurses. One of my nurses, they held my hand the whole time, all the way to the ER and the operating room. And, um, it was, I mean, for a patient, it was a quick surgery. They put you under and then you wake up.
Right, right.
Um, once I was able to come to, I realized how just amazing that this technology was. It really felt like I had a working heart again. Um, I had to spend a couple weeks in the hospital before I could leave, and but um, I was very eager to get out of the hospital, get back on my feet, and get myself in the best condition possible to for my transplant, which I knew was still in the plans.
Can you
Uh,
briefly explain just the LVAD to everybody, kind of how it works and the amount
sure,
of time that one can be on that before transplant is really needed?
sure, absolutely. LVAD is an acronym for left ventricular assist device. It is a centrifugal pump or I like to call a turbocharger, that is literally attached to the left ventricle of the patient's heart. It essentially takes over the function of the left ventricle, which is considered uh, the more important side of the heart. So the side of the heart that's outputting blood to the rest of the body. The LVAD has a tube coming off of it that attaches to, I believe, the ascending aorta, and that's where the blood is passing through. The pump itself is powered by two batteries and a controller that sit on the outside of the patient's body. So they're connected by a drive line which exits through the lower abdomen, and that is what is powering and controlling the pump. So that is literally um, the lifeline for the LVAD and the patient. And so it is a miracle of a device because um, it is so technologically advanced that people are able to actually live with this device for the rest of their lives if transplant is not an option. For me, this was considered a bridge to transplant. So this was by means to keep me alive until a donor heart is available.
Do they
And
even bother with measuring ejection fraction when the LVAD's in there? Is that even like a relevant marker at that point, or not so much since it's
that's a good
artificial?
question. As far as I'm concerned, I don't recall them really measuring it. Is if anything, the controller itself will let you know how many liters per minute that it's
Mm,
output.
okay,
And
interesting.
it can actually keep up with physical activity,
It
which kind of
adjusts.
yeah,
Wow.
and it's kind of what made my story go viral because here I am with this LVAD. I was told that, you avoid strenuous activity. You don't have to be going crazy. And with me wanting to be back in the gym and to be working out, I I went into the gym after I left cardiac rehab, and I wanted to see what this thing could do. So I, took baby steps. I went slow at first, but as I was beginning to feel stronger and stronger, I said, well, I mean, I'm not feeling like this pump is, slowing down. So I would take a look at the controller and it would be pumping X amount of liters per minute. I couldn't tell you exactly the number, but it would adjust with what I was doing in the gym,
Wow.
not immediately, but eventually it just I really can't tell you how they're able to do that, honestly, but
Yeah.
it's
So it's
I,
amazing.
I was back in the gym. I have the videos and the pictures to prove it. And it was actually at this point the creators of that pump, Medtronic, took note and they're like, well, this is not what we intended this machine for, and we can't believe that this is what it's able to do. And um I actually reached out to them myself to say thank you for creating this amazing device. And
Yeah.
I think they took that to heart and they invited me out to speak at one of their holiday programs um, as a survivor. And this is post-transplant, obviously, but it was it really it really inspired me to use my voice for something good. Somebody who's gone through this type of journey. There are other people out there. I recognize that there are other people out there who could um, at least take something from my story, and I could provide hope for people in this way. So, the LVAD is probably one of my favorite inventions
Yeah,
that the
sure.
world has ever seen. And with me being a car guy, it was right up my alley to really just kind of uh, really just showcase what an amazing piece of technology this was, and still is. So I lived with that machine for a year and 1 month.
Wow.
Um, I was able to be at home. I was able to await my transplant at home. Interesting fact that once you have something like an LVAD and you no longer require intensive care, you actually move down on the waiting list. So
All right.
one of the criteria for who's at the top of the list is how sick is the patient? How long have
Mm.
they been waiting? And in this case, since my condition actually has bettered because of the device, they move you down on the list, which I was okay with that. It made sense. And so at the end of a year and 1 month is when I got that phone call saying that heart had been found for me. And I it was a regular day. It was September 21st, actually. So we're about 6 days, 8 years and 6 days out from transplant. Um, Regular sunny day. And, they called and asked how I was feeling. And I said, I feel fine. And my assumption was that they were going to have to make some medicine changes, or they'd need to come in for the LVAD or do something. And they told me that a heart had been found. And again, it's one of those moments where you think that there's going to be this emotional outburst. And I just kind of like froze on the phone. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, wow.
They're like, are you excited? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well,
And really,
how I would imagine there'd be such mixed emotions because I haven't looked at that data in a while, but my understanding is, a significant portion of people don't make it out of that surgery. So I could imagine if you're doing okay, you're feeling okay on this LVAD, even if it's not necessarily going to be like a 50-year solution, you're feeling okay, and now you're about to go into a major, major surgery, right? I mean, I'm sure that comes with some fear.
it 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 eventually did. And like I said, from befriending my nurses, they were not just my nurses, they were kind of like my coaches. They were my guides through this. And I'm sorry, my dog just chooses the perfect times
No
to
worries.
let us know he's here. But they served as just incredible guides throughout this whole thing. They informed me that, when I get the call that, this is what's happening. The fact that you are getting this call does not 100% guarantee that they found a match, because there could still be that follow-up phone call saying that things didn't work out. It wasn't a perfect match. We have to go back to waiting. They told me all the ins and outs of the surgery, so I could alleviate whatever fear I had about it. And if I'm going to be real honest, I think that being the youngest of three brothers, you're kind of desensitized to some of the morbid things. They'll introduce you to these
Right.
things at a younger age, so you're just kind of like, I started watching heart transplant surgeries on YouTube while I was still waiting. Like, and it didn't, and so maybe that was a bad idea, but in the moment, I was more fascinated by it than anything. Um, in a way, I was kind of looking forward to I was kind of looking forward to going through this. I mean, obviously, if I had a choice to not have to do it, I wouldn't have done it. But it
Sure.
was one of those things where I just realized I was like, I have to accept this. I have to accept this. I have to choose to be okay with this. And if I am able to watch a video of this surgery happening on another patient, then I think I'll be okay with being in that position myself. So, but I really do attribute a lot of that help from my nurses, all the staff that were working to keep me alive. I knew that I knew that there was somebody out there, a family out there, who was mourning the loss of their loved one, and that I would continue their loved one's legacy. And
Have you met the family or do you know the family of
yes,
yeah.
thanks to the aftercare services, I was able to arrange a meeting with my donor family. We met 3 days, 3 years. I'm sorry, 3 years on the day of my surgery.
Wow.
So I was able to meet the Smith family. Their son Donald was he tragically passed away in a motorcycle accident, and he was actually on his way home to watch a Steelers game with his parents. And so the days leading up to me meeting the family, I am panicking, actually. I'm terrified that I didn't have the right thing to say. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, I realized that the right thing to say would bring their loved one back. And we all know that's not possible. So I realized that this was just one of those moments that I have to let humanize me. Um, I understood that being there is can be more than just can serve more than what words can do. It just me being there and letting them see that their son's legacy continues to live on, um, has its own words for itself. And even greater, I was able to let Donald's mother listened to her son's heart via
Oh,
stethoscope.
jeez.
Um, and yeah, it really if it when I would if I really want an audience's attention when I go to tell my story, I show them that video. And it really encompasses what we're all about at New England Donor Services is we center what we do around the families. Whether they are a donor family or they are a family of someone who desperately needs an organ. Um, we want to make sure that these families understand that organ and tissue donation has a place for everyone and that we are not just a third party outside of a hospital, but in some cases, our volunteers will say that we're an extension of their family. And for me, not only are they an extension of my family, but they are the people that I am so lucky to work shoulder to shoulder with now. The same people that helped facilitate my transplant, I call my coworkers, and now I can call my friends. We work in a very unique field. Um, it's not like people wake up every day and say, I think I'm going to go pursue a career in organ and tissue transplant. I sure as hell wasn't saying that, especially when going to college. I had friends who were going to go pursue nursing degrees and were planning to be doctors. And I said, that's awesome. More power to you. But you'll never see me come anywhere near a hospital. And yet here I am.
Right, right.
In a hospital almost every week, but for the best reasons possible. Um, it 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 was I can't even explain, I can't even say it was quite the experience. It was an incredible experience going through what I went through, learning about myself, knowing that I can overcome something like this. It leaves me, people will see my picture and they'll say, "Oh my God, you're in great shape." And, oh, that leaves me no excuse. I'm gonna go to the gym tomorrow. But like for me, I'm constantly reminded that I don't have any excuses to be molding myself into the best version of myself. Um, so the work that I do, able to go and speak to schools, doing podcasts with people such as yourself, I am constantly reminded that I'm here for a reason. And when if I'm able to change someone's outlook on life, outside of the topic of organ and tissue donation, then I've done my job. Um, Especially even if it's just one person. Um, and I will continue to chase this feeling of being able to um, change people's lives in ways that they didn't even know was possible. And I consider myself having a small role in that because I can't even tell you how many people are responsible for helping me get to where I am today. The amount of people who were involved in my care had to be in the hundreds. Um, but the work that I'm able to do makes me feel like I am continuing that work for the people who helped me. So yeah,
Man, it's a really incredible story, and thank you for sharing that in such detail. I have
yeah.
a lot of questions and thoughts. And obviously it's an emotional story for sure. I actually saw a clip, I mean, this was a couple of years ago, and it was basically the same thing. It was I forget, I think it was a father who listened to his daughter's heart in the patient who got the transplant, and of course,
Yeah.
like he just breaks down crying. I can't even imagine like just the emotions there. Do you have any contact with the family, or was it mostly just that one meeting after three
Um,
years?
no, thanks to the power of social media, I try to chime in to I'm connected with Rosemary, who's my donor mother. Um, I do my best to check in with her, and I get to share the work that I do at New England Donor Services. If we do an event or I'm leading a panel discussion, she sees that, and she sees her son up there, and um, that for me is it provides a great sense of comfort. Uh, you know, I'm I have big goals for myself, and I'm glad that I'm able to bring her son along with me. His life was cut short. I'm actually the age that he was when he passed away,
Wow.
and I'm going to do my best to at least let him see the world in have him around great people. So it really does bring a huge purpose to my life that I'm never alone. Every Mother's Day I will share a picture of my mom and I'll have a picture of Donald's mom.
Well,
Uh, because I technically have two moms now, which
yeah,
which not a lot of people can say. But um, yeah, the thanks to the internet, I'm able to stay in touch with her. I don't
yeah,
have
it's
to,
great. Have you
handwritten letters.
seen have you seen the movie John Q with Denzel Washington?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
watched it
So
yeah, it was one of the movies on my list when I was in the hospital because it
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah. If people listen haven't watched that movie, it's a great movie. But that scene where it's basically a story, his son has a heart issue and needs a transplant and whatnot. And there's a scene where Denzel Washington says, "I am not going to bury my son. My son is going to bury me." And the first like 5 times I saw that scene, I just like got teary-eyed. It was just very
Mhm.
emotional. So stuff like that, like parent children scenes always get me in movies. So I'm sure both
Mhm.
for their parents, Donald's parents, and your parents, the whole thing was probably incredibly emotional.
Yeah, it was John Q actually struck a few chords with my story. It's just, I feel like the only difference was just between me and the young boy was his age. And in the beginning of the movie, he he stands up and he says something along the lines like, I'm gonna be like Ronnie Coleman, who's
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of the most popular bodybuilders out there. And it just happens to be that I was also participating in physique contests, and I was like, this movie's gonna make me cry. Like I had
yeah,
seen it before, prior to any of my heart ailments, but I love the movies, and I draw a lot of inspiration from movies. And the way I see movies now, especially after going through what I've been in, I've become more empathetic. I
sure.
have been able to just kind of really attach myself to the plot of a movie. And so John Q was just, I mean, with Denzel, yeah, he's gonna get you. Like he's gonna there's gonna be a point in that movie where he's gonna give you chills. And um moving forward, I just kind of internalized that energy, and it's just like that's what I want to bring to the table when I go and have these discussions with people about organ donation. I didn't neglect to mention that at the time I was in the hospital, I actually created a nonprofit called Hearts at Large, which I'm no longer running today because of my job now. But it was kind of just a result of being bored in the hospital, but at the same time finding my voice in something. And because I knew that once I had gotten out of this hospital, one, I would be looking for work. And two, I want to be able to be okay with telling my story. So right then and there, I said, hey, I'm in the hospital bed. This is life. I know at some point someone's going to see this and they'll probably be in the same position as me, or they'll have a loved one in the same position. And maybe this will be an opportunity to provide some hope, to provide, some peace of mind, to let people know that people can come out of these things alive. Um, but
And you
yeah,
were so when you first found out, you were like middle of college. How old are you now, Andrew?
I'm 34.
34. Okay. So when they, because obviously the technology has come a long way. I've actually had a couple of patients who have had heart transplants. Most recently, a patient who's probably in his mid 50s, and he that he feels great. His was due to hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So
Mhm.
people listening, basically the walls get too thick.
Yep.
And where he is, he said there's a patient there who is going on like 33 years, something like that. And
Post-transplant.
post-transplant, right? Yep. I think that's close to the longest we've seen. You would probably know better than I would, but I think it's something like that. But it's kind of amazing that now, I mean, you get some people, that get a transplant in their 30s, and again, with improving technology and everything, obviously nobody knows what their lifespan is going to be, but when you're talking about adding 30, 40 years potentially to somebody's life, I mean it's really unbelievable.
Yeah, it's that, I'm trying to be like that person,
Sure.
30 something years out from transplant. Being a transplant patient, you also have to, there's a lot of mental barriers that you have to overcome or work to overcome. One of them is the possibility of having to be retransplanted. Um, the fact that even when you get your transplant, it's not just a walk, it's not a walk in the park. I mean,
Right.
you are now a transplant patient and you have to be an active patient in your care. Um, I actually had a bout of rejection a year after my transplant.
Oh, wow.
Come to find out that young African American males are gifted with robust immune systems. So when it comes to getting a patient such as myself into the proper therapeutic range for immune suppression, uh, it can be a challenge. Usually people leave the hospital post-transplant after about 2 weeks. For me, it was just over 3 weeks, and that was solely because of their the work required to get my immune system to where it needed to be to for my body to accept the new graft. So after having uh, rejection, and then ended up having a third open heart surgery to have a clot removed. Um, Again, just perspective just kind of sets in, and you just have to be like, okay, well, I am a transplant patient. No one said that, things were going to be easier afterwards. I was prepared for it. And of course, it took took me to still had to wrap my head around things, but, it all traces back to asking the right questions, being okay with with your setbacks, your fallbacks, and really finding the right support system, which I can't say that a lot of people have, but uh, the bare minimum would be the people who have a hand in your care, your nurses, your doctors, your social workers. They are there to help you and to again help you become the best version of yourself. So really, if there's anything that I would for someone who's going through something like this, utilize those resources and ask those hard questions. It's their job to help you.
Yeah, and you make a good point. I mean, it's not like you said, just a walk in the park. I mean, people who are not familiar, you're on these anti-rejection medications forever, right?
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
right. So
Now,
yeah.
is that going to make you more prone to? I mean, they're immunosuppressants in a sense. So is that going to make you more prone to all illnesses, essentially?
Um, in theory, yeah, I think it does depend on the person. Um, it's you are it can open the door for infections, even cancers. So now, I have to see a dermatologist every year. And it just it's hard to say what exactly would be, the thing that would cause me to fall into an illness. It's just making sure that I am getting my blood work done on time. I'm staying on top of my medication, and so far I have not had, knock on wood, of course, any type of other physical ailment caused by immune suppression at this
Right.
point. They've changed medicines around, they've changed the dosages, the brands, and um, we're at a point now where we still are looking over what that rejection that I had 7 years ago leaves behind those donor-specific antibodies. So that's one thing that they're keeping their eye on, to make sure that those don't really accelerate what could cause, rejection. So
So
as
you
long as those
had, how did they determine the beginning of that rejection? What were you noticing the 1 year mark?
It felt like I was going back into heart failure. Shortness of breath was the symptom that really stood out the most. And I told them, hey, I'm experiencing shortness of breath. They did the test, they did the blood work, they did the right heart catheterization biopsy, and they were like, all right, well, you're in, yeah, stage 2 rejection. They had to admit me to the hospital for 2 weeks, and they did a procedure called plasmapheresis, which is similar to dialysis, where they're filtering this time not your blood, but your plasma, with
Mhm.
synthetic or donated plasma. And this is essentially just taking out those antibodies that are causing the rejection. That paired with something called IG something, IG, IV, IVIG. Um, and those two together and change in medicine actually got me back on track. Um, which I'll actually be, I have to admit, I'm profoundly impressed with. Like they just kind of, it just worked.
Yeah, it's
Um,
amazing. And do
but
they look at like when that was happening, was the shortness of breath and whatnot due to the heart actually functioning worse? Like maybe it went from a 50 to a 30 ejection fraction, or was it just simply that it was being attacked by, your antibodies and therefore just, for one reason or another, unrelated to, let's say, ejection fraction, you felt worse?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think I could answer that. Yeah, so I guess what you're asking is like, was this like a physical problem with the heart, or was it the antibodies that were causing that? Um, I really don't recall exactly what
Hmm.
I was told. Uh, all I know is I would have to get, if I had to take a guess, it was just the antibodies that were causing it because the actual physicality of the heart, um, as far as I'm concerned, has not changed. Um,
And what is
so
your current ejection fraction? Do you know?
um, I think it's somewhere around the low 60s,
Nice.
I recall. Yeah.
So
So
for
we're
people
getting,
listening who are not aware, a typical ejection fraction is going to be 55 to 70%. Sometimes in athletes, you do see it slightly lower because their heart is so efficient, so it could be like low 50s, but yeah, 55 to 70. So that's great if you're in the 60s.
yeah, that's exactly correct. It was yeah, because sub 10, like you
Yeah, that's
definitely,
incredible.
it hurts and you are tired, you cannot breathe.
Did you have
And
actual pain? Like, was there physical pain?
yeah, it was
Really?
at that point it was chest tightness and even breathing it was painful because you have that edema, that fluid retention that first starts off in your lungs. And with that, you have you go through a lot of coughing. At times I was spitting up blood, um,
Wow.
and
Jeez.
all that coughing, that irritates your throat, and then you have just your heart working overtime. And you usually don't feel your heart in certain instances, especially it's sometimes when you feel it beating. But like I've never like that pain in my chest was unforgettable, really. Like it wasn't something that was like I wasn't like, gripping my chest, but like it was just always there. And
Yeah.
like it felt like there was just something pulling on my heart. Like my heart was being pulled in two different directions. And I just wanted to just cut those wires that were pulling it apart. That would, if that best describes the feeling, because it
Mm,
just constant chest pain.
wow.
Um,
And
but
now these days, I mean, so you're 8 years post-transplant, and again, people really should go check out your page and everything. You're pretty damn jacked for anybody, let alone a heart transplant patient, So definitely a page worth checking out. So how do you feel on like a day-to-day basis now?
Um, well, I mean, like anybody else, I have up days, I have down days. There was a uh, there was a time where we were still trying to figure out which medications best suited me, and it was I was waking up almost every day with stomach pain, GI issues. Um, and you're grateful to be alive, but it those medicines, they can be a little bit aggressive, and depending on which ones you're on. And um it took some time to try to resolve this issue, because if I had these issues, this stomach pain, I couldn't take my meds, and that's a problem in itself. But fast forward to today, there's not so much stomach pain, but eventually you do start to deal with some of the mental residual effects of going through all of this. So I've started to see people for I've started to start therapy. I've began to really tackle some of the mental things that I've had my entire life, even before having um, a the heart ailment. Learning that I have ADHD, and I've just began to really tackle those issues, and it really does stem from wanting to maintain my health. It's much more than just the physical aspect of it. Like you were saying, people will come up and say, you're a heart transplant recipient. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, you don't look it. And I'm like, well, that's the
Mm.
look I'm going for.
Right,
Um,
right.
and that's one part of it. But it's someone can see that you look healthy, but they obviously they can't read your mind. And for that,
Right.
I had to sit down and do a lot of self-reflecting and understand, although that I've kind of gotten through this physically, I can't ignore the fact that there's got to be some type of mental aspect that also needs just as much as attention as I put myself into the gym, what am I doing for my mental health? And that's probably one of the newer things that I'm really, really working on now.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that I'm doing that. I take it day by day, and like I said, I have my up days, I have my down days, but I know it's kind of cheesy, but if you look at a heart monitor, that's the sign of life is seeing those ups and downs, and if it
Yeah.
goes flat, then there's not much life there. So, um, I'll continue to do what I think is necessary to make sure that I'm headed in the right direction and um, and then I'm making people proud along the way.
Yeah, that's great, man. I'm glad you brought up the mental health aspect because it's such a
Mhm.
huge thing, and obviously it's not something everybody necessarily thinks about. I've had some very serious health scares in my life, and not like minutes away from heart surgery, but some serious things, and it's something that I've said, to family before that you unfortunately like there's really no going back from that. You can't just
Mhm.
forget it. It's almost like you have to like open up to the matrix or something like that. There you can go back to like living normally, but your awareness of mortality and the I don't know, just how fragile it all is, you're just always aware of that. And I think it could be really tough to almost go back into like normal living for some people. I had a patient not that long ago who had a cancer diagnosis and she seems okay now, like she's in remission, but
Good.
she was asking me about, what materials the crown's going to be and whatnot and all this stuff. And we just had this conversation. And so I actually had my assistants leave the room. I just kind of talked to her privately about it. And I told her parts of, like my story and everything. And so she had said, she was like, well, how'd you get back to just, being normal? Like, how are you working? Because like this, she like stopped working. I mean, she just hasn't been. And,
Mhm.
and I mean, my answer was just to some degree, it's just kind of what everybody eventually goes through, right? Like if you think about it in one sense, every 80-year-old on the planet is living with the understanding that they could go at any time, right? And it's like very fresh in
Right.
their mind. And so in a sense, I mean, not that this is necessarily solace, but it's like, hey, I understand you, Miss Person who's 35 and dealing with it. Everybody is eventually going to deal with that unless it's like a sudden thing, like like the motorcycle accident. But it's something that we're all going to get to, and some people get there quite a bit faster than others, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But um, obviously I don't have a perfect answer for everybody, but it just recognizing that it is, I think, hard to return when you've had that. And I've known two people who died of colon cancer, one who was 20, one who was 30, and way younger than you ever would have even started having colonoscopies to even check for something
Right.
like that, right? I mean, these things really unfortunately happen. And so I think it is really a reminder to focus every day on what you have. I definitely relate a lot to Stoicism. I don't know how much into like philosophy you've gotten personally, but they talk about things like last time meditations and like it's just one of those things that I relate to is, like the quote that say one day these days will be the good old days. You ever heard that quote? And
Never heard that. Yeah.
yeah, so basically just to say, one day when you're 20 years from now, you're going to think back on these days. And so I think about that almost daily if I have a moment where, maybe this is an annoying thing going on or whatever. I just think, man, like 20 years from now, I would kill to have this day back to really live this experience or something, in most
Mhm.
instances. So, not to get too philosophical, but there's the mental aspect of all this is huge.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And appreciate you sharing that as well because it really does go unnoticed in a lot of situations. Even myself, I would have to stop myself and say like, all right, well, how is this affecting me mentally? Like I do that a lot more now. And when you're referring to, one of these days, these eventually these will be the good old days. And I'm already, I already kind of experience a little bit of that. Me and my friends will sometimes joke about how there was and obviously not for everyone, especially people working in hospitals, but during COVID, there was a nostalgia. There was kind of this, things were just different. And now that, things have kind of eased up, it's one of those days where you can't go back and you can't really repeat it. I don't think we'd want to, but that has more recently has served as a reminder what you're telling me that we do need to be waking up and grasping everything that we have and being grateful for it. And it's for our mental health, for the sake of our mental health, that's important. So I'm glad that we could touch on that actually.
Sure, man. So I just want to ask you a little bit about your training because obviously,
Yeah.
you have a well-functioning heart now, but I don't know, are there limitations? Have your cardiologist told you, hey, don't do one rep maxes, no Valsalva, or is it, like what's your training look like?
My training is I'm completely open to doing really whatever I want. Obviously, to prevent injury or anything like that, but um no limitations.
Wow.
If anything, I could do a little bit more cardio, which is, ironic, but I'm knowing that I have no limitations in terms of what I'm able to do physically it's a blessing. That's a gift.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're training, again, just from a fitness standpoint, like are you
Mhm.
doing just like a body part split? Like what do you have goals
Oh,
to do like photo shoots in the future, compete, anything like that?
I always talk about or I should say I think about competing. I'm not so I'm not as uh driven to go back into competing as much as I was back when I was able to, because that competing that allowed me to set goals in terms of not necessarily how healthy I am, but what I look like. And at this point, I shouldn't say I don't care about what I look like, but from a fitness standpoint, I really have fallen into wanting to just be strong. So I've been doing a lot more strength training. And
Cool.
to answer your question about like what my split is, it's I have it as uh, upper lower, rest, upper lower. So I
Okay.
have in
Same.
the beginning, yeah, right. So in the beginning of it's a good split. So in the beginning of the week, I'm doing my heavy lifts. So big bench. I'm doing not so much squats anymore. I've actually transitioned to leg press and deadlifts for my to really tax my lower body. And then the second half of the week, I'm just kind of doing conditioning. Uh, Not so much as strength training, but really just I want to hit a goal weight of just around 200 at the end of the winter.
Oh wow.
Um, and so I'm doing that naturally, obviously. And so
Imagine you
I
just
don't
start blasting gear now.
yeah, my conflict of interest in a lot of
Yeah,
areas.
right.
Uh yeah, yeah, obviously not that. I I really am I'm really not sure if I want to get back into modeling. Like I think, taking pictures would be something that I could see myself doing. In terms of competing, um I don't, I really am, if I'm being honest, I really don't think I'm about that life anymore. And
Yeah.
that's not to, say that it's, nobody should be doing it. it just is what it's just how I've grown. And it was something that I did in the past and I had a lot of fun doing it, but it would, I wouldn't be hurt if this was something that I left behind. If anything, if I were to compete, it would be, if I were doing like a stage competition, it would be to just draw more attention to organ and tissue donation because I have the
Yeah, yeah.
scars to prove it. Um, but at the same time, I don't want it to be about just aesthetics. It's more like I have these scars. This is what I'm capable of doing. This is what all people who've gone through something that I've gone through are capable of doing. If anything, I would like to reprise my high school track career and get back into
Mm.
shape and go and do some track and compete at the Transplant games that they hold
Oh,
every couple
awesome.
of years. And I think that would probably be a great way to not only set a physical fitness goal for myself, but again, at the same time, bringing awareness to a great cause and being a part of something bigger than myself. Um, so, the fact that I have these options, I'm grateful for that. But I feel like I'm definitely leaning towards more of, like, cool body, but, what can you do with it?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
leaning towards
That's
more of
awesome.
that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think also even just like the functionality would almost be more of a demonstration of like, hey, what can this heart do? Because obviously we know many people who have great physiques and maybe they're not the most healthy, right? Um,
Exactly.
but to say like, hey, I've got this new heart and like look how well I can perform with it is kind of amazing,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, exactly my point. Yeah, there are stories out there where, people look up to these big folks, and then, next thing you know that, they've passed away or they're in the hospital for
Yeah.
something. I mean, if we look at Ronnie Coleman, I love the guy, but that sport really it taxes people. Like it really takes a lot out of them.
Yeah. Well, Flex
You live.
Wheeler, he had a kidney transplant and then actually
I
competed
didn't know
again.
that.
Yeah, but he competed again after the kidney transplant and obviously, had to use a lot of gear to do so, which is kind of there was some controversy on that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah. So
so yeah, that wouldn't be the best advocacy for it.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, man, wow. Well, I mean, I'm obviously going to continue following along with your story and everything. It's really an incredible story. And again, thank you for sharing it. So on one lighter topic, you said you love movies. What's the best movie you've seen this year?
Mm. Oh, this year?
Yeah.
Oh, dang, I have not seen. Oh, wait, hold on. There was one that I. Oh, I'll be honest with you. I've been trying to watch a lot of horror movies, and horror movies just aren't scary anymore.
Yeah, yeah, you got numb
Um,
to it.
it hasn't been so much movies as it has been like TV series.
Okay.
So if I had to give you like my top three movies, number one is Jurassic Park. Um,
I just finished watching all of them actually.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not happy with what they've done to the whole franchise, and
the
I feel
Jurassic
like
World
I
trilogy.
hope
Yeah,
I hold myself accountable for having the responsibility of going to watch these movies regardless of how they feel about them, and I just
yeah,
can't
yeah.
do it. Like, like I should be knowing what they're doing to this franchise, and I refuse to go and see what they've done. So,
Jurassic
that's
World 3 are yeah, so basically the sixth of the Jurassic movies. As I'm watching it, I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen because there's the term suspension of disbelief, like, and actually it's a perfect example of it where it's like, okay, we're going to suspend our disbelief in this world. Dinosaurs exist, right? But then
Mhm.
the things that they do are so unbelievable, even in that context. I'm like, this is so ridiculous. It's hard to watch, but yeah,
Yeah.
I forced myself through it.
They leaned really far into that. We don't know enough about dinosaurs, how they act. It's like, well, they surely, I doubt that they would be taking their cues from a human being. Like, I doubt that they're
Yeah,
trainable. And they got raptors running through snow, and I'm like, they're cold, aren't they cold blood? Whatever. But
yeah.
yeah, but still Jurassic Park. And then I would say number two is Interstellar.
Okay.
I watch that movie maybe three times a year. I'm not joking. Like
That's a
it's
common favorite for
always, yeah.
people. Yeah.
It's more on the complex side depending on who you ask, but it's just for me, it just if I'm having a rough time, Interstellar will just reignite that inspiration for me, and there'll be a message in there that I'll take from it, and then I'll be able to keep moving. And then third would probably be Tropic Thunder.
Okay. I also watched that recently, coincidentally. Yeah.
It's I just because of the purely, well, I shouldn't say purely, but for a big reason is because that movie, it had perfect timing,
Hmm.
um, considering what's involved in that movie. It came out at the
Yeah.
perfect time because like if it came out a day later, people would be they it would just net, a lot of it just would hit all the wrong marks with in
Yeah.
terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
being accepting everything. But
Yeah. Being PC
I'm
and
sorry, they
everything.
nailed it. Like they, so it's I would have to say those are probably one of my top three. More
Nice.
recently, I have I've always been a fan of the American Horror Story series, which have kind of taken a downward spiral recently. But the new Aaron Hernandez sports story that just started airing has been um, my new uh,
I haven't seen it.
my new watch. It's pretty good. It's okay.
Yeah.
There's some things that you'll probably question, like, oh, well, now that he's passed away, they're kind of just going crazy with some of these details. But it it though yeah, American Horror Story was another one that I really enjoy watching. Yeah, but I went to school for production, film and television
Oh,
production.
really? Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's right up my alley.
Nice,
So I'm
man.
really
Cool,
yeah.
cool. All right, man. Well, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing your story. We'll have links to your stuff below and whatever charity we end up going with, we'll put that below as well. But where can people find more of your content?
Well, I would say I'm most active on Instagram. Not as active as I used to be, but you can find me there, Fitness with AJ. And if you want to see some of the work that we are doing, I work in community outreach with New England Donor Services, which is an organ procurement organization, the same organization that helped facilitate my transplant. We always have activity going on there. We have walks, and if you are someone who wants to be involved, you're in the New England area, and maybe you want to volunteer, you can reach out to us and we can put you in touch with all the right people. We could use all the help that we can get, but definitely follow us on our social platforms on New England Donor Services as well. We're everywhere: Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and see what we're all about. We're trying to foster a community to create safe spaces for people to have these conversations about organ and tissue donation, but more about legacy and being advocates in our own personal health. There's an extension to organ and tissue donation that is kind of required for our message to come across as effective, and that's exactly what we're doing. So, yeah, Dave, I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad that we were able to finally do this. I knew from the beginning that this was going to be a great conversation, so I'm really happy that we were able to have it.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Thank you again for taking the time.
Of course.